Well, hello again, and welcome to another episode of Sermon B-Sides. My name is Rusten. I'm one of the pastors here at Commandment Church, and I'm here with Pastor Jon, my partner in crime. How you doing, man?
Good. How you doing?
Good. So we're a little late getting to some of these because I think we just finished the 10 Commandments, but we're running back into the Commandments, and we're on Commandment 5.
Yep.
So these will be coming out into summer, which is great because we'll be taking a break from B-Sides during the summer, going over the Psalms. So
yes, that was the shortest intro ever. You realize that?
I know we didn't talk about whiskey or what are you drinking? You drinking LaCroix or anything right now?
I am Coke Zero. Is it
Coke
Marvel Zero. Coke? Yeah, I guess so. Hey, so it's honor your parents' day, right? Well, that's the command. That's the text.
Yes.
And yesterday was Father's Day.
Yep. Yesterday was Father's Day.
Did you do anything special?
Yeah, we did movie night. I went and saw my dad. I went and shared a beer with him. And then after that, at the same time, so right after church, I went to see my dad, gave him a gift, shared a beer with him. Brenna, at the same time, went to see her parents, saw her dad. And then we met up there for a short bit. And then we came home and we got dinner ready and charcuterie, and we did a family movie night.
Nice. What movie did you guys watch?
We watched Twister.
Oh, okay.
I hadn't seen that in a long time, and tornadoes, and I remember liking it as a kid. And
there you go.
I wanted to introduce the kids to the tornadoes.
Nice. Yeah. So we did a like a Mexican family platter thing for lunch.
Cool.
Which was great. Had some nice drinks, and then. Yeah, shortly after that, I took a nap. I was out.
I took a nap yesterday too. I did. I when I first got home, when everybody was getting dinner ready, I took a nap.
Yeah, it was a wonderful nap. And then my boys are redoing our fire pit, so that was their Father's Day gift. And then we had charcuterie, which we do every Sunday night. And then I got to pick the movie, which is. I always have to be careful when picking the movie because there's so many different, preferences, and not everybody likes the same thing. But it was Father's Day, so I'm like, I'm picking whatever I want. And then it turned out to be a movie that everybody liked. I was like, I didn't know this. So we watched Interstellar.
Oh yeah, that's a great movie.
That is a long movie, but I love that movie. And
there's also a father component in that movie.
Yeah, it's all about like. If you go read blogs on Interstellar, like they talk about who was it that created that like dimensional space where Cooper goes back and is talking to Murph. Like that's the big like who made that. But the real story is a dad who made his daughter a promise and kept the promise. That's the whole movie. Yeah, and it's wonderful. So I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a good movie. There's an intriguing play that love is a part of the fabric of the universe. That's where a lot of the people who really like sci-fi thought, "Well, this is dumb." But as a Christian, it's kind of actually an interesting move to make because there is we would confess that love is what makes the universe possible. Right?
Yeah, correct.
Love. So
yeah,
I found that intriguing when I mean, it's kind of done in a weird way, but like whatever, like if you're going to do something, you're going to figure out a way to do it. And it's, whatever it has to somehow show up on film. I don't know how you conceptualize or visualize how love is part of what makes the universe function. Right. But
yeah, yeah,
but they did it, so
incredible story.
Yeah. So honor your father and mother, and then there's actually a promise associated with this command as well, which
Correct.
is that it will go well with you in the land that I am. Does it include that I'm giving you, or just that it will go well with you in the land
that the Lord your God is giving you?
Okay.
Yep.
So this, when you're dealing with commandments, it's very interesting because it's such a short text, but you can take it so many directions, and I'm sure you dealt with that in preparation here. But I remember one of the things you talked about was there's a, and I think the section was what this commandment reveals, right?
Yeah.
And it reveals that God, is God's for the family, right? God is.
Yes. That's an
So
understatement.
yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? And
Yeah. So in the context of God establishing Israel as a nation and giving them these laws, um, you know that when Israel is developed, there's going to be different layers of jurisdiction. You're going to have a king. You're going to have authorities. But one of the things that stands out specifically in this commandment is this is really the only nod to human authority, right? The first commandment is God, have no other gods before you. There's no other authorities, but you don't have anything about governments. You don't have anything about kings. You don't have anything about mayors and
yep,
policemen and all these other things that that Romans tells us are God's gift and the way that God orders a society. You don't have any of that. You just have mom and dad.
yeah,
And it's almost, there's a temptation to go, oh, did God overlook all these details? And that kind of response reveals how we have kind of been trained to devalue the family.
yep,
And it's like this assumption that, well, whatever's lacking in the family can be made up by, whatever other authorities.
yeah,
And so when you only have the family addressed in terms of like spheres of authority in Exodus, it's saying something about how important the family is, not just in your immediate family, but that it goes well for you in the land. This is for a
yeah,
whole society.
yeah,
The
yep.
health of a family, right? Because societies are just large groups of families,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yep.
So, yeah, so it's easy to overlook that, but it's like this is really, really important to God, and it should be really important to His people in a number of ways.
Yeah, and so one of the things that that you'll find when you study, like, let's just say, like the Westminster Catechism, or you study somebody like John Frame, who does a massive book on the Ten Commandments, his Doctrine of the Christian Life, is that all the systematic theologians took honor your father and mother as like, not just like dealing with one piece of these human authorities, like one sphere, but as the basis for the other ones, right?
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
you have and that this teaching to honor your father and mother, when writ large, results in the honoring of kings.
Correct.
Because there is things begin somewhere, right? Society doesn't just start with a king. I mean, you could say that Adam and Eve in the garden, you had the first pastor, father, and king, right? You have all of them all at once potentially
Sure.
there. But that idea of connecting honor thy father and mother to the society's other spheres of authority is an organic one that gets developed in the maturation of a people.
Yeah.
Naturally, as that command is followed.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yep.
that those two things are not, they're not. No, the spheres are separate, and it's important to keep them separate, but they are not. The command to honor father and mother is directly related to the command to honor the king, for instance.
Yeah. And it goes both ways. Like if you listen to Al Mohler at all, he'll talk about, I may be saying this wrong, I think it's the doctrine of subsidiaries, where he said the further, am I using the right word?
I am not familiar with that. I'm like ready to learn.
It's the further you get away from something, the harder it is to actually govern or influence. So a mom and dad can nurture a child in a way that the state never can.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Even if they try to do the same job, right? Because you're getting further removed from the original design, the original form. The further you get out, it's like if mom and dad can't raise you, then like an aunt and uncle is a way better solution than the state.
Yep.
And so that's baked into honor your mom and your dad. These are the ones who are going to lay the foundation that the rest of your life is going to be built upon. and
Yep.
nobody else can come in and fill that role. And anytime they do try to, now there are times where, like, because of tragedy, the state has to step in, and someone
Sure.
who's removed has to step in. But yeah, once you start removing children away from that environment, away from mom and dad, the nurturing and the admonition, right, which is supposed to come from mom and dad, it can't be replaced by
Yep.
substitutes. And the further you get out, the worse it gets.
Yep. That is that's one of the things that's really, there's kind of a mirror image there actually with the flip side, which is, so you said to if mom and dad aren't there or aren't doing well, then the society crumbles, right?
Yeah.
Like, and on the flip side, you have if the kings and queens, whatever, don't, the magistrate doesn't respect mom and dad,
Yeah.
right? Then what happens? The same thing happens,
Yes.
right? And
Yep.
you have different degrees to which a society will be motivated to do that, right? Like if the family's breaking down, you expect the state to try to come in and overtake the family's ground.
Yeah.
Right. But sometimes you have instances where the family isn't necessarily weak, where the state does this on their own volition to try to break down the family, because that's your biggest hindrance to power, right?
Correct.
To absolute totalitarian power is break down the authorities underneath you.
Yeah.
And that's what you saw happen with like Soviet, the Soviets.
Yeah.
Like intentionally trying to break down the family and family connections, because they knew that those connections are what made their total rule difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the family is the greatest threat to communism, to statism, to any type of oppression, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that we're seeing right now in our state is that the state is continually redefining what a good family is, so that it can seize the power to step in and dishonor mom and dad.
Yep.
So, if you have a kid that is being exposed to, like, hard drugs and trafficking and all that stuff, like, you want authorities to go rescue that kid, right? That would be an appropriate expression and use of force. But the law now states that if mom and dad don't buy into pronouns, or mom and dad don't want to get gender affirming care, or mom and dad don't want their 13-year-old girl getting an abortion, that the state now can step in and protect the child from mom and dad's, wishes and wisdom and parenting, which is evil.
Yep. And what you see happening also is the proliferation of cultural ideologies that are, and let's just say, like, cultural incentives that atomize people, right? This is the thing, is like, if you have a tight family, right, you're not dealing with individuals, right? You're dealing with these covenantally bound units that have deep connections to, like, and my household is just one household that's connected to another household. Like, I have a dad, right? And there's a heritage there that I'm to honor. Mm-hmm. Well, that is that's like thick, heavy bricks in a wall that the totalitarian state wants to break down.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But if you just have a bunch of individual sticks, right, that are not connected by anything, right? Yeah. That's really easy to break down. That's really easy to usurp authority and to basically make. So we're living in the time of extreme individualism, which is downstream from, like, Rousseau, which, by the way, Rousseau is weirdly this person who is, like, loved in our time because he was all about the individual, but he's also called the father of totalitarianism. Like, philosophically speaking, because he was smart enough to know that his thoughts would result in the need of something like a total control state,
right?
Like and it's true. Like, you break, because he was all about breaking down social, like think about the no he popularized the noble savage, right?
Mm,
If you get man all by himself without any social pressures to convey responsibility, right? What you're going to find is a noble savage, because it's really the social pressures for responsibility and structures that make a man, it's almost like
hmm,
they make a man derelict or something like that. Like, so he was very much a denier of original sin and thinking the man by himself
yeah.
is good, and if we let the individual rule his life how according to his pleasures and desires, then we'll be good, like the noble savages. Well, then you go visit the savages and you're like, oh, they're not noble at all.
Yeah.
So his so his a lot of his view is debunked by experiencing the
Hmm.
the so-called noble savage. But that that there is interestingly also a connection here to Jethro's advice, right?
Mm, mm,
Uh, um, Jethro gives advice to Moses, which you could say this is the beginnings of government that
mm.
separates powers,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You have Moses at the top, who's just supposed to deal with really intense cases, and you and there are captains or leaders of 10. So what are those tens? Those tens are it's 10 households,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so 10 households, and then you have different layers of numbers and stuff. But each one of those, by assigning a leader over these smaller units, you created also a separation of powers,
Mm-hmm.
which is I believe I even read somewhere that that's where we get our principle,
Yeah.
our political principle of separation of powers. But what happens when you have no separation of powers?
Mm.
Well, it becomes very easy to
You have a
become
dictator.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yep.
Jethro's word is true today. This thing you are doing is not good.
It's not good. So
So
shout out to the public schools.
I mean, we're seeing, and there are government things that incentivize this individualism, but there are also
Yep.
cultural things. So like, um, you know, school. Even just think about the normal path
Yeah.
of a kid going to school, then going to college, then moving somewhere, and he's separated from his family.
Right.
Well, that also works to atomize people and not have
Yep.
them connected to
Right.
their heritages. And that's and you could say also like drugs and isolating things do the same thing. Like, so
Yep.
let's make drugs more easy to get.
Yeah.
It's like,
It's almost like someone's pulling the strings behind the scene.
yeah,
Almost.
I don't know if that person pulling the strings is like a competent politician or if it's Satan himself.
I think it's Satan himself. Yeah, I was just thinking about like, if you talk to teachers, they they will share like stories of the stuff that they deal with in a classroom is absolutely insane.
nuts,
Like,
yeah.
I'm talking about behavior, like clearly inappropriate, unacceptable,
Violence.
disrespectful. Yeah, you and I have both heard the
Yep.
stories at the school board meetings and have talked to teachers. And so on the one hand, you've got public education that's dealing with the fruit of dysfunctional families, right?
Yep.
And at the very same time, through their policies
And their
of-
ideologies.
and their ideologies of not sharing with parents where their kids are at, they are feeding into dysfunctional families
Yep.
that then make school worse.
Yep.
So it just becomes this cycle.
Yeah, they are perpetuating the problem that they are asking taxpayers, funders for funding to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't
Yeah.
start in this school. I mean, it definitely, it's
Yep.
something that starts in the home.
Yep. Yeah, but if you teach an ideology that separate, like that kind of deteriorates the family at its get-go, like think about a lot of the expressive individual stuff is like contra family, right? Like the
Mhm.
LGBTQ thing is contra family, both in nature and how it's implemented, because by nature, the LGBT stuff doesn't produce families, and by implementation, when you are trying to make sure kids are safe to change their genders by going behind parents' backs, like you're also you're perpetuating the thing.
Yeah.
So
I just heard this crazy story. There was I can't say it. Never mind. Sorry.
Okay, I had a thought. This is going to change directions a little bit. Do you want to
Do
say
it.
anything else about this? Okay,
No,
so
you're good.
one of the things the last time we went through the Ten Commandments, I got to teach on the Fifth Commandment, and one of the things that struck me is, okay, is this in the first table or the second table of the law, right? Because it's dealing with people, but it's interestingly the first commandment after the first table stuff, like about directly how you relate to God and you worship and I think it's a very interesting commandment where it stands between the two tables.
Yes,
because it's kind of the hinge,
absolutely,
right, between the two.
Yep.
How do kids learn to honor God? They learn by honoring their parents.
Yeah.
How do kids learn about God? They learn from their parents. There's an interesting, even the way that the New Testament talks about authority. There's no authority under heaven that is not given, that men have it, that's not given by God, right? So there's a kind of, God exercises authority in the world through, they are sinners, they're broken, right? But through men who hold offices of authority. They need to get their authority under the authority of God's word, which is what you like. That's just Deuteronomy 6, right? Deuteronomy 6, Deuteronomy 6, right? Like they need to teach what God's word teaches, and by doing so, they are functioning as this. As this like hinge between God's authority and how kids are brought up to know who God is.
Yes,
there's a interesting way that pans out, and I think that it goes so far to say when you reject authority as a concept, like when you reject the fifth commandment, you're not far off from just rejecting God.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
There can be bad authorities. Like we know that people can be bad, but the idea of authority that men hold is something that is you reject that idea. You're rejecting something that God has baked into the world,
right?
And things that He's delegated. So to reject, for a kid to like just be disobedient, he's not only being disobedient to his dad, he's also being disobedient to God.
Yeah. You can see the fifth commandment is like the point of contact between God and the future generations. The fifth commandment is the way that the first four commandments, and actually all of them, but if you're looking at them in order, that's the way that is getting handed down to future generations. Because home is where you learn. Home is where you're discipled. And I don't mean through some like formal discipleship program. I mean by just constantly being exposed to the ethos of a home that honors God.
Exactly.
Like that is such a huge gift. To be in that just day in and day out, because what that does is that becomes the norm, right? It becomes the standard. And that's what you then aspire to. What was modeled for you, you replicate, and then you model for the next generation. Which is the flip side of that, is that mom and dad need to, live in a way that is honorable.
Exactly.
Which doesn't mean perfection, but it means mom and dad should be seeking to obey the Lord in their lives so that their kids are seeing a faithful example of what that looks like.
Exactly. That's one of the things that when I taught through the catechism with the academy kids, when we got to this commandment, I talked about how there's an implicit command here too. There's an explicit one to kids, but there's an implicit one, which is, parents ought to, live in such a way that they are worthy of that honor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Now that doesn't mean that the honor of kids are to pay their parents is contingent upon that obedience in
Correct.
all aspects, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, it does put, I think, a implicit command upon parents to do so, to do what you just said.
Yeah. To be honorable. So
Exactly.
one one of the things I remember that Sunday specifically because every Sunday we invite people to come and ask questions and
Yep.
or if they need prayer, that the elders are available for prayer. That Sunday, more than any other Sunday, people came up, and every conversation I had to do with conflict with parents.
Yep.
And how do you honor a parent when? So these were all married couples with their own families, and I think all of them had children. So how do you honor a parent when there is conflict, like significant
Yeah.
conflict and past hurts?
Yeah.
What's that
So
look like?
yeah, and you might add to that question, what what are the different kinds of honor due at different stages in your life,
Mm,
right? Like, so, like
yeah,
like
yeah,
there's a um there's an obvious honor your father and mother when you're a young child, which is just obey what they tell you to do, right?
yep, yep,
And respect them. And that could be as simple as teaching a little kid to, okay, when I tell you to do something, like, do it right away, don't like wait 10 minutes, right?
yeah, yeah,
Like, delayed obedience is a form of disobedience.
mm,
So but
yeah.
when you get to be your own household, how does that change? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I think it does change. I think I talked about that in the sermon a little bit. Like
Yeah.
when you're younger, honoring means you do what you're told.
Yeah.
I think it's more complicated when you're older,
Yeah.
and especially when it comes to issues of conflict.
Yep.
That I think um, honor means that you are, even when there's conflict, you're considering your parent, you're considering them or rendering them to be weighty.
Yep.
And a
Yep.
lot of that has to do with attitude. Like, honor your parent doesn't mean you agree with everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you ignore, sin when that happens. But it does mean that you have to respect the role that your parents have played in,
Yeah.
bringing you into the world, which is a significant act. And and honor is to I think there's a tendency to write your parents off, right?
Especially in
Especially
our
when there's
culture.
conflict. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think that honoring is like you have to fight that urge. It
Yep.
comes out through words. It comes out
Yep.
through time, like making time. I had parents talking about just regular communication, like not length. That's one of the things like you learn early in ministry is like when people are sick and in the hospital, it's like, don't go there for hours. Like just a little a little bit here
Yep.
and there is right. And so I think communication with parents as a as you start your own family and you're out of the house, like just a little, like you can just text, hey, thinking about you, praying for
Yep.
you, thankful for you, just simple, right?
Yep.
It's simple
Yep.
things. But when there's conflict involved, I think it's the weightiness, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
tone, and it's the language, and
Yep.
all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think that there's a like you said, how you speak, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
tone is one thing, but also I think that, you know like, if I had to say what are some applications for honoring your father and mother, I'd say, for kids it's very simple, like obey and
Yeah.
respect. And
Yep.
when you're older, I think those things get modified based on you running your own household. There's not necessarily the same level of obedience. I mean, I don't think that obedience is the same because you are ahead now, right? But
Yeah.
there is a there is a the honor piece definitely continues. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
is not just a don't dishonor your parents. I think it's a positive command of honoring them.
Yeah.
And I think that includes speaking well of them where you can.
Yeah. 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 And so my all of my kids they're driving now, and I got a daughter who's getting married in a couple weeks. And we did something yesterday for Father's Day, which was super uncomfortable for me. But I started this tradition a couple years ago during our Christmas break, where I would think about one word that describes every family member. And we'd sit down at our biggest meal for our Christmas trip to Leavenworth, and I would say their name, and I would say the word, and I would explain like what I admire and appreciate about them. And we just go around the table while we're eating German food, and like, it's great. But then they turned the table on me. And yesterday for Father's Day, they're like, my wife saw, well, I had all the kids think of one word. And it was like,
it's good.
Yeah. And it was super uncomfortable. But it was so life-giving to hear that, to be honored, you know?
Yeah.
To be honored it was a really beautiful, profound thing. And I'm like, man, it's good to do that to our parents.
Yeah.
My parents aren't here anymore. Your parents are here.
Yep.
You know, people listening, they have parents, like, man.
Yeah.
Give them a word.
I do try to go out of my way to express gratitude to my parents, you know, and I think it's easy to, it's like easy to just not do that. Right. It's just easy to like, you know, but like, you know, and also to maintain a relationship with my parents. That's also one way I honor them.
Yeah.
And, I think that your awkward, feeling you had is funny, because I think that we were talking about this earlier before we started recording, but you know, one of the things that this commandment means is that you're supposed to teach your kids to honor you.
Yeah.
But how many of us think like that's awkward? Like, hey, you know, it's easy to, I mean, the younger ages is easy to just say it says to obey your mom and dad, right? That's easy to hit that one. But like, you know, how do you teach your kids to not just obey, but also honor, like to respect, to do the things we just said we want to do for our parents?
Yeah.
Because that's part of what you're called to do as a parent, is to teach them what God's word says. And so it includes that. And and this brings up something else, which is like Father's Day was just yesterday, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have been given on a platter, right? I don't know by who, by Hallmark. I don't know. We've been given on a platter this opportunity to explicitly honor our parents. You know, we have Father's Day and Mother's Day. And
what's a mom and dad though?
Yeah, exactly. Can we even do that anymore?
Isn't it birthing person's day?
Honor your non-birthing person and your birthing person. So, but that brings up, you know, something I think is kind of funny. And I think that it's worth exploring, which is we weirdly live in a time where, like, if you've had a hard childhood, right, where you didn't have a great dad, or you didn't have a dad, maybe you were, you know, adopted or something like that, or you know, your relationship with your mom is really bad, right? Like Mother's Day and Father's Day, sometimes for some of those people, is kind of like a hard day, which I can understand.
Yeah.
But we're living during a time where if you're ever on Twitter, it's really funny to come around Father's Day and to watch Christian Twitter around Father's Day and Mother's Day, because there's a ton of people that get all nasty about, you know, if your church, you know, does a Mother's Day sermon or a Father's Day sermon, like find another church, right? Because that's not biblical.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like we never do Mother's Day sermons or Father's Day sermons, but they're reacting against this idea of like having these situations where people might be triggered, right, by their trauma or whatever. And whenever I hear that, I think, well, I mean, I'm not explicitly against a Father's Day sermon, because that would just be an application in the pulpit of the fifth commandment.
Right.
Same with Mother's Day. Yeah. Like, okay, today we're going to talk about honoring fathers. Like, that's what it is. Yep. And I mean, you can go so far as like, and on the father side, it's you know, people might feel trauma because of a bad father situation. On the mother side, you might have the same kind of thing, but you also have people in the congregation who, you know, are infertile, right?
Yes. Yep.
And the idea of honoring mothers to them feels like they're being reminded of something painful, and that shouldn't happen or whatever. So I think that is a little bit of a symptom of our time, though, which is wants to reduce everything down to like, you know, that not what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, let's reduce everything down so that no one feels triggered.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the thing: is like everybody, um, whether if you're a Christian and you're in church, like everybody has the fifth commandment.
That's
Everybody
right.
has that. So
Yep. Yep.
there's but you can even feel a little timid to say Happy Father's Day or Happy Mother's Day on those days, right? Because like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't want to trigger somebody, but like
Yeah.
that, I think that's just giving into the uh, I
It's
don't
the
know.
spirit of the age.
It is. It is giving into the spirit of the age.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's kind of like it's almost like a Christian version of being politically correct. Like
Yeah.
because if you're discipling Christians who had bad fathers, bad mothers, or who are infertile, you still have to teach them what this command is for and
Correct.
and why it's good.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's something I always I often think about during this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, why don't we close this by
Cool.
maybe quickly mentioning some things that we like. It's honor our mom and dads. What's something you
Oh yeah.
respect? Just something quick about mom and dad. So I'll start since you can think while I'm
Go.
doing this.
Cool.
So when I think of my dad was a man of his word. That was like
Yeah.
that's what he was known for. He had a reputation in the community. He was a man of integrity, and whatever he said. I remember running into multiple people, and I shared this at his celebration of life. Multiple people who said, "If Tom Needham gives you his word, you can take it to the bank."
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know a lot of people that you can say that of, but that was definitely my dad. My
Cool.
mom was a feisty fighter. She was like all 4'11", German woman, but she left Germany and embarked on this crazy adventure with my dad. Came here, didn't speak English, had no money, but I think a lot of that was motivated by her wanting to give her children a better life than she had, and so she took huge risks to do that, and she was super strong in that way. And I really only came to understand that after she had passed away. But yeah, very much respect that about her.
Yeah. Well, I'll start with my dad. My dad, first off, my dad is a character, and I love him. Right? He is a character,
Yeah.
and it's funny because my
Runs in
sister
the
and I,
family.
yeah, my sister and I both say, "Hey, I think we're turning out a lot like dad in some of these areas," and we'll also add, and I kind of like it. Right? I like it. I like being like my dad,
Yeah.
and some of the reasons for that is, my dad is let's see, can I say this on here? My dad is a no BS kind of guy, right? Like he just
No baloney sausage.
no baloney sausage, and he's not he's an engineer, and so he thinks like an engineer, but he's also, because of some of the qualities I love about my dad, he's no BS, but also when things get really, we've had situations in our family life, where things have gotten really difficult, right? Like stuff where my dad has had to deal with very difficult stuff. And my dad in those situations is not overcome by the anxiety of whatever it is. My dad has demonstrated the ability to be cool and collected and address whatever the hard thing is principally. And I've seen that over and over again, and I want to be like that. And because the situations needed that. They needed somebody to be, get his head collected and address what needed to be addressed, and not get really emotionally all over the place in a way that was going to be hurtful to the situation. And so I think, like, I'd call that maybe in moments of anxiety, my dad has been very sober minded, and I think that's something that I want for myself, and I see that and I value that, and I've told him that on multiple occasions. But that's one of the things that really stands out. My dad also, my dad loves the Lord, and he's loved the Lord more so the more I've known him. And my dad has loved my mom, right? And that's one of the things that me and my sister would talk about, is like, Dad just adores mom. That's one of the things we just love about him, right? So that's my dad. And my dad is like, just like atomically like for like you need to read the Bible every day. It's so important. Like I love that. My mom is the same in terms of loving the Lord, and my mom taught me. There's certain words my mom would say growing up, and one of the things that was always coming out of her mouth whenever we did something that was wrong or inappropriate, she'd always just ask, "Is this pleasing in the Lord's eyes?" Which was kind of like an admonition when you're a kid, but like my mom was teaching us from a very young age that like the most important thing is, what does Jesus think about this, right? And so that was I love that priority of the Lord has always been something I've seen in my mom, and my mom also is just she. I mean, this is kind of a funny thing to say, but like she went out of her way to make like birthday celebrations and Christmas like crazy awesome. And just expressed love in that way for us. And it was so much so that like my friends, when they were planning their like summer vacations, because my birthday's in June, they'd want to know like, when is Rusten's birthday, because we want to make sure kids just like know they can't miss it.
You got to be there because Jody's gonna throw an epic party.
And that's one of the things that she does is she makes things very fun and hospitable, and she's often always willing to do that. Like I do a book club right now occasionally called Books and Bourbon, and she's hosted most of them, and she just opens her house and like it makes it the most awesome thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's an example of speaking well of your parents.
So maybe a little challenge if you're listening to the podcast today. Take a moment and call or text your mom or your dad or your mom and dad, and just share something you appreciate. Something small.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be long. Just a simple, hey, I really appreciate this about you.
Apply the 5th commandment.
There you go.
All right. Well, that was fun. A little longer than I thought we were going to go, but time slipped away.
Surprise.
Yes. Until next time, everybody, trust Christ, go to church, and love your neighbor. See ya.
See ya.